After 4 days away from home, the little girl ran to hug her mother as always. But this time, her small body trembled, and she whispered, "He did it again." From that statement, seemingly harmless, details began to piece together into something very wrong. But there were no tears, no obvious wounds, only silence, and a fear that grew day by day in that seemingly peaceful home. It was drizzling. The rain was like thin silk, threads covering the road with a blurry layer like a fogged-up mirror. Claire pulled her suitcase across the damp stone path. Her thin coat was soaked and her back was cold and wet. She had been away from home for 4 days, not too long, but just enough for a familiar feeling to start to bubble in her heart. The desire to hear her child call Mommy. To see Victor holding out his arms to welcome her, and the warm, brightly lit house smelling of baked goods. Claire opened the door. The house was silent. The living room lamp was dimly lit. No smell of baking, no music. Everything was exactly as she had left. The armchair was tilted at an angle. The vase of white tulips was still full of water. The forgotten note on the table was still there. Victor came out of the kitchen offering a gentle smile. "You're back." He put his arm around her shoulder. "A just enough hug, not too tight. Everything is fine. You must be exhausted. Get some rest. I'll take care of everything else." Claire nodded, smiling at him. Victor wasn't Emily's biological father. He was her second husband, coming into her and her daughters' lives when Emily was just 3 years old. On paper, he was still her dad. Claire nodded, looking around. "Where's Emily?" He hesitated for a second, as if he didn't quite hear the question. "She's in her room, probably watching cartoons. Let me call her." Without waiting for him to move, Claire called out, "Emmy, honey, Mommy's home." Silence. A moment later, there was the sound of shuffling footsteps on the wooden floor. Emily appeared in the doorway of her bedroom, clutching Mr. Buttons, her teddy bear with a torn ear. Her eyes were dark-circled, and her skin was pale. Under the light, Claire paused. She sat down, reaching out her arms. "Come here. To Mommy." Emily stopped for a few seconds, then moved forward, one slow step at a time. When she was just a foot away, she stopped, looking up at her mother. Claire hugged her daughter, her hand touching her back, hot and feverish. Emily flinched slightly. "What's wrong, honey?" Claire whispered, gently, brushing her hair aside, about to kiss her forehead when she turned her head away. Emily didn't answer, but after a few seconds, when her face was close to her mother's shoulder, she whispered, like a breeze, "He did it again." Claire's blood ran cold. She held her breath. "Who, honey?" Emily didn't answer. Her eyes glazed over, losing focus. Her small body went limp. "Emmy, what's wrong?" Then Emily slumped completely against Claire. "Mommy." Her voice faded, then stopped altogether. "Victor," Claire screamed, holding her daughter tighter. "Call an ambulance. She has a high fever. Hurry." Panic pounded in her chest like a drum. Victor rushed over, frantically, scooping Emily out of her arms, running towards the door. Claire barely had time to grab her coat and phone, following him barefoot into the rain. Outside, the rain was falling harder. In the car, Victor sat behind the wheel, his hands shaking slightly as he fastened his daughter's seat belt. Claire sat beside him, pressing a cold cloth to Emily's forehead, tears welling up in her eyes. "Emmy, can you hear me?" "Mommy's here." "It's okay, honey." Victor glanced in the rear view mirror. "I don't know. When she got sick, she said she had a headache, so I gave her some cold medicine." Claire squeezed her daughter's hand gently, saying nothing. In her head, the sentence from earlier kept repeating itself. He did it again. It wasn't just a fever. It wasn't just tiredness. Something was wrong. Emily had never said anything like that before. She usually chatted about everything at school, laughing when her mother told her bedtime stories. But today, she didn't hug her mother, didn't smile, just a trembling shadow, and that sentence like a needle scratching lightly across a smooth lake. Claire looked over at Victor. He was staring intently at the road, his mouth pressed into a tight line. For the first time in 4 years of marriage, Claire felt a hazy wall erected between them, something nameless, but quietly cracking. At the hospital, the lights shone brightly. Emily was taken to the emergency room. Claire stood outside, arms wrapped around herself, cold from her palms to her spine. Victor sat beside her, his face buried in his hands, silent. A doctor came out. He has a viral fever, severe dehydration. But the fever has gone down and she's been given fluids in time. "Are you her mother?" Claire nodded. "Has she said anything strange, panicked or scared?" Claire flinched slightly. "Why do you ask?" "Just a routine question." "She's having an unstable psychological reaction. Maybe she's just too tired." Claire didn't answer. In her head, the image of Emily standing in the doorway reappeared, dark circles under her eyes. The small sentence like the whisper of a small animal cornered. She went into the room, sitting down beside the bed. Emily was sleeping, her breathing even. Claire gently stroked her hair, her hand trembling slightly. She leaned down to whisper as if afraid to awaken something lurking in her daughter's sleep. "Honey, who is he?" The white light in the hospital room cast a dusty haze over everything. The air was heavy and still, only the beeping of the heart monitor, flashing rhythmically like the ticking of a clock, counting each endless second. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. Emily was sleeping deeply, breathing raspily, her thin hand revealing pale blue veins. She gently pulled the blanket up, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. Her hand was warm, but couldn't reach the dream that was holding Emily captive in some distant place that her mother couldn't reach. Victor stood near the window, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders slightly hunched, his shadow stretched long on the cold tiled floor. Tonight there was no more rain, only a thick silence in the three-person room where each person seemed to be in their own world. Gentle knock at the door. The on-duty doctor came in, his voice quiet. "We have preliminary results. She has mild pneumonia, but the worrying thing is her weakness, physical and mental. Her body is exhausted due to prolonged poor eating, and there are signs of stress. We need to monitor her further, especially psychologically." Victor nodded. "She's always been sensitive. Lately, Claire's been away on long business trips. I guess she misses her mother." Claire turned. "You said stress." "Yeah." Victor nodded, walking closer to the bed, placing his hand on his daughter's shoulder. She hasn't been eating much, or she's irritable and then silent. I guess I'm not as good at comforting her as you are. Emily twitched slightly. When Victor leaned closer, she tilted her head, turning her face to the wall quietly but decisively. Claire noticed. She said nothing. Victor kept his voice steady, his eyes tinged with regret. She hasn't been talking much these days. She's been good during the day, studying in the morning, playing with her teddy bear, and coloring in the afternoon. I even made chocolate cake. She ate 2 slices. Claire looked at Emily's hand. In the light, she could clearly see faint, long marks from her wrist to her elbow, like the traces of a pen pressed hard. Multiple layers overlapping, not marks from coloring. She touched it gently. She played all afternoon. Victor didn't hesitate. Yeah, sometimes. She even goes out to the backyard to draw on the tiles with chalk. Maybe because she sat studying for too long. Before that, her hand got marked with ink. Claire nodded, but her eyes didn't leave the small hand. She leaned down, bringing her nose close to Emily's collar. There was no scent of the usual baby bath soap, but a faint smell of antiseptic, cold, and unfamiliar type of smell often found in rooms that have been cleaned too thoroughly. The on-duty nurse brought in the medicine. When Victor stepped forward about to help Emily sit up, she blinked and quickly turned her face into the pillow. Her small hand gripped Mr. Button's tightly. The nurse looked, pausing for a second. Does she usually avoid her dad? Victor smiled. Not usually. She's probably just too tired today. Claire caught the nurse's fleeting glance before she turned away. No suspicion, no accusation, just a look like someone who had seen too many unspoken things. The clock turned to 2 a.m. Emily stirred, whimpering softly. Claire jumped up, sitting close beside her, pressing her hand to her cheek. The fever had subsided, but her closed eyes still twitched slightly, as if running away from something in her dream. Then she heard, "Sorry, I did wrong. I'll study more. Don't lock the door anymore. Mommy, don't leave me." The last sentence wasn't clear. Maybe it was Mommy. Maybe it was someone else. But the voice trembled, broken like a young bird that had been caged for too long, unable to fly. Claire sat up straight. She tried not to let the tears well up, tried to keep her breath steady. But a pain surged up, not from the words, but from the way Emily curled up, her hands clasped together as if waiting to be punished. Victor sat in the opposite chair, opening his coffee cup and asking softly, "Did you hear what she said?" She was talking in her sleep. "It's nothing," he sighed. "Kids watch too much stuff on YouTube these days. They probably hear nonsense and bring it into their dreams." Claire was silent. Then she asked quietly, "Did you take her anywhere in the last 4 days?" Victor shook his head. "Number just around the house. It's been raining. She doesn't like going out." Claire nodded slowly, her eyes stopping on Emily's backpack placed in the corner of the room. A small stuffed rabbit was hooked onto the zipper and it was hanging upside down. A small detail, but Emily had always arranged things very neatly. Everything was facing outwards. The hooks always straight, so who had touched it? Around dawn, as the lights outside the hallway dimmed with the last shift, Victor went out to get coffee. Claire sat back in the room, her eyes looking out the glass door. The city was still asleep, but inside her everything had awakened. The question, he did it again, still had no answer. Claire didn't want to believe it, but she knew her mother's feeling wasn't easy to fool. Beneath the warm facade that Victor created, something was shifting, like a crack in the wall, not yet clear, but already hearing the wind whistling through. Claire sat on the edge of the sofa in the living room holding a steaming cup of tea. The delicate jasmine scent spread out, but not enough to dispel the oppressive atmosphere that had clung to her chest since morning. Emily was sleeping on the armchair, clutching Mr. Buttons to her chest. She was sleeping lightly, curled up like a kitten in a fleece blanket. Her left wrist was exposed from the edge of her pajamas. Claire could clearly see the faint swelling on the soft skin. The doctor had discharged her. She needs to rest for a few days. Avoid psychological stimulation, he said. If there are signs of prolonged fear, you should take her to a specialist. Victor volunteered to clean Emily's room, make the bed with new sheets, and bought more teddy bears. He had been baking cookies all morning. He always spoke softly, walked quietly, opened the door without making a sound. But Claire realized it was that gentleness that made her uneasy, not a loud voice, not a scolding, as if everything was carefully calculated not to leave traces. I'm going to the market for a bit, Victor said, taking his keys. You rest a bit. I'll buy salmon to make porridge for her. Thank you. Claire smiled, a smile as faint as morning dew, touching glass. As the sound of the car engine faded, she stood up, walking towards Emily. Her small hand was still clutching Mr. Buttons. Claire leaned down, very gently, turning her daughter's hand over. The swelling was clearer in the light, not bruised, not torn, but swollen, as if something had been wrapped tightly around it long enough to cause pain, then removed just in time, before leaving a bruise. She inhaled gently, reaching out to stroke her hair. Emily flinched, opening her eyes round and blank, then immediately turning her body to face the back of the chair. Not a word. Emmy. Claire sat down beside her. What happened to your hand? Emily didn't answer. She held her breath. Claire could hear it clearly, as if she was afraid that just one word would break something. Honey, did someone hurt you? Claire asked again, slowly, her eyes never leaving her daughter's neck. After a long time, Emily turned her head. Her eyes looked straight at her mother, not crying, not scared, just silent. A pleading, weary look, as if she wanted to say a lot, but didn't dare to open her mouth. Then she quietly turned her face away, pulling the blanket high up to her ears. Claire didn't ask any more. She sat there for a while, then stood up and went towards her bedroom. In the afternoon, when Victor came home, he brought a bag full of vegetables, fish, fresh milk, and chocolate chips. He talked more than usual, boasting about the promotional sale at the store, asking Claire what she wanted to eat tonight. Emily sat at the dining table playing with her spoon. When Victor placed the bowl of porridge in front of her, she flinched slightly. Claire saw it clearly, just a small movement, but a mother's instinct couldn't be mistaken. Eat a little. There's salmon today, Victor said, his voice as sweet as Honey. He handed her a tissue to wipe her mouth, but her hand recoiled as if touching electricity. Even so, Victor didn't show anything. He was still gentle, smiling, taking the tissue back and turning to Claire. Think she's better today? Claire nodded. Slightly, not answering. She focused on every detail. Her daughter's eyes, her breathing, the way she squeezed her fingers around the spoon, her eyes secretly watching the door, as if afraid someone would suddenly walk in. That night, when Victor was sound asleep, Claire went into Emily's room with a warm glass of milk. The room was tidy, smelling of new soap. She gently placed the glass down, sitting beside the bed. "Emmy," she called softly, "if there's anything that scares you, tell Mommy. I'm here." Emily didn't open her eyes, but pursed her lips. Her hand pulled deeper into the blanket. Claire leaned down, touching the mark on her wrist. It wasn't red anymore, but still slightly swollen. Didn't ask anything more. This time, she just sat there for a long time until Emily fell asleep. The next day, Claire tried walking along the neighborhood. She talked to Mrs. Taylor, who had lived next door for over 6 years. Claire. "Oh, I heard about the little ones. Fever. So pitiful," she said while watering her plants. "Mr. Victor takes great care of her. I even saw him bringing the teddy bears out to sunbathe every morning. So thoughtful." Claire smiled, then went to Mr. Charles' house, a retired veteran who often sat on the porch reading the newspaper. Victor, very polite. He even helped me when my bike chain came off the other day. "Your little girl is pampered like an egg." I even saw him buying ice cream for her every afternoon. The compliments were like a glossy paint covering a flat wall. No one saw anything. No one suspected anything. Claire thanked them, but her heart felt heavier. She knew Victor was well loved, always on time, always kind, always making others feel safe. That was what worried her the most. Late in the afternoon, Claire stood in the laundry room. She found a gray rubber band in Emily's old jacket pocket, the type usually used to bundle documents or tie things tightly. One end of the band was slightly worn, showing signs of being stretched strongly. Claire picked it up, turning it slightly. It fit perfectly with the circumference of her daughter's wrist. She looked at the rubber band, looked at the window, then looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. Perhaps no one would believe her if she said what she was thinking. Perhaps there was no evidence. No blood, no screaming, no clear traces. Only a child afraid in silence. Only a mother slowly learning to believe in that silence. Claire poured warm water into a white porcelain cup, her hand keeping it still and quiet. The kitchen was minimalist, clean, with no sound other than the crackling of the hot water just poured. The wall clock read 9:15 p.m. She had just placed the cup on the table when she heard small footsteps slowly coming from the other room. Emily walked past the kitchen door carrying her math notebook, her eyes not meeting her mother's. Her back was hunched over, her feet not hitting the tiled floor, hard but just gliding lightly as if afraid the sound would make someone angry. Claire watched her until she disappeared into the small study near the stairs. She said nothing, nor did she follow. She stood still quietly and began to observe, like the habit of those who are learning to trust their instincts instead of explanations. For the past 2 days, Claire had taken time off work to take care of her daughter. She said that to the company, to the neighbors, and even to Victor. But in her heart she knew clearly. Wasn't just to take care of her daughter, but to keep Emily in sight and keep the truth within reach. She walked very quietly to the study. The door was only ajar, leaving a small crack just enough to look in. Emily sat at the table under the yellow light. Her left hand supported her forehead, her right hand trembling slightly as she wrote. Her collar drooped, revealing a faint scratch on the back of her neck. Claire paused. On the page, the math was slanted, the lines pressed heavily, as if written with the full force of her hand. There were calculations crossed out, then rewritten, then crossed out again. Crumpled piece of notebook paper lay on the edge of the table. Emily's lips were pursed, sometimes tensing up as if swallowing something stuck in her throat. Claire retreated, returning to the kitchen. A moment later, when Emily left for the living room to watch cartoons, she went into the study. In the small trash can next to the table were 3 or 4 crumpled worksheets. One sheet was still half open. Claire picked it up. The letters were large and jagged with ink smudged in places as if it had been wet. She brought the paper close, sniffing it. Not water. Tears. At the very bottom was a line crossed out strongly. I won't do wrong again. I'll study until it's right. Claire gripped the paper, pressing it down on the table. Her fingers trembled slightly. Then she put it back in its place as if she had never touched it. Late at night, Victor was asleep. Emily had also been lulled to sleep by Claire with a gentle story, and she fell into a very deep sleep or very still. Claire went into the study. In the desk drawer was the old phone used exclusively for the security camera system, the camera system that had been installed since Emily was in kindergarten after an old theft. Victor didn't care about it. There was no password. She opened the app, entered the code. The interface appeared slowly, but clearly. Each black and white frame. From the cameras around the house, the front door, the hallway, the staircase, the corner of the living room, and especially Emily's bedroom.